My name is John Coppola, the chair of the P&Z. This is my first meeting. It's Monday, February 24th, 7:30 p.m. And we are going to hear from the county on the PRC exemptions and minor modifications. Bill Malin and Kathy Belgian are going to present, maybe others. So thank you, everyone, and take it away, Bill and crew.
All right. So yeah, as I said, my name is Bill Malin, Kathy Belgian with zoning evaluation, and also Leslie Johnson is joining us from the zoning administrator. So I'm going to share my screen and make sure we're good to go, and we'll start. So you should be able to see my PowerPoint presentation. Is it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. And I'll drop in the chat. I do have this version is actually, I just posted it online earlier today on our dedicated web page, and we'll drop that website in the chat, and it's at the end of the presentation. So again, we're going to give you a brief presentation related to a potential amendment for the PRC, when a PRC plan will be required, as well as changes to minor modifications. There was a detailed white paper which should have been provided to you, and provides a little bit more information. So with the readoption of the zoning ordinance in 2023, the Board of Supervisors directed staff to review the PRC plan exceptions, particularly as they related to community facilities and open space. So this amendment is largely focused on when a PRC plan would not be required when a site is requesting minor revisions. For in context, just set the history, in 1962, we first created the PRC district. It was the first planned district in Fairfax County. So the communities of Reston, Burke, and Cardinal Forest are the only 3 PRC districts in the county. So when you are rezoned to the PRC, a development plan is approved by the board. A PRC plan is required that has additional detail. Now, prior to 2007, those PRC plans were administratively approved by Department of Public Works. In 2007, the board made a change to make the process legislative, since many PRC developments were not subject to proffers, and development plans were not specific with the nature of units and layout, amongst other things. So given that redevelopment could occur in unanticipated locations without public forum due to the blob nature of these development plans, the board amended the zoning ordinance to require a PRC plan to go through an administrative process, through a legislative process with public hearings. So when a PRC plan process is changed, there's no updates to when exceptions would be permitted. So the current exceptions are pretty similar to what date back to 1994. And you can see on this screen sort of a summary of those exceptions. And staff reviewed these, and we also looked at these, how they compare to minor modifications. So a minor modification is when, if your approval in any other zoning district besides PRC, and you want to make minor changes to your approval, you would ask zoning evaluation, Kathy Belgian, to see if you could do those administratively. If they meet the requirements of the ordinance, you may be able to make administrative minor modifications. Otherwise, they may require board approval. So we kind of looked at really specifically the ones related to changes for buildings. And so minor modifications, as I said, is administrative approval by zoning evaluation. So PRC plans permit building additions of the lesser of 10% or 2,000 square feet, whereas minor modification allows for building additions of the greater of 500 square feet or 5%. That's up to a 2,500 square foot addition if development's under 250,000 square feet. If it's over 250,000 square feet, then it's 1%. So again, one would be both administrative, whether you ask for a building addition through a PRC plan exception or a minor modification. We also allow for additions. This is the exact language between what a PRC plan exception says and what minor modification says. So they're very similar provisions. And again, this is, you'll have these copies of the slides so you can read this in detail. So we looked at kind of the differences between the two. So as you can see on the slide, if you have a 5,000 square foot building, that's where minor modifications and PRC plans get you the same addition. If you're under 5,000 square feet, a minor modification may get you a bigger addition. Once you get to So between 5,000 and 40,000 square feet, you actually get a little bit more through the PRC plan exception than you would if you have minor modification. And if you're over 40,000 square feet, again, it shifts over to a minor modification. So from staff perspective, it seemed questionable. Why would we let a building addition of once, and a PRC get something bigger than a PDC district, plan development commercial or plan residential mix, when it may have similar impacts? PRC plan exception also allows for increase in parking up to 10%, allows you to change some, transitional screening, setbacks, again, that sort of that 10% range. And these are similar to what minor modifications would allow you for that 10% change in yards, and does allow for building height. Again, we also have similar provisions related to accessory structures for both of these uses. So what we did originally propose is that we would get rid of pretty much all the exceptions for minor modification or PRC plans and direct to the minor modification provisions. As we did some outreach, we heard some concerns raised. So we're proposing some changes, and we're working through the exact language right now, and we will be updating the language here shortly. But some of the changes that we're looking at is to create a separate process or separate criteria when you're making changes to community facilities, something owned by, for example, Reston Association or Reston Town Center, and that for other non-residential uses or other multifamily uses, you would use a minor modification if you want to do a building addition or make changes to setbacks or transitional screening. We're planning to keep the PRC plan exception to allow for 10% increase in parking. This is primarily because we have a similar provision under minor variations, but minor variations would require you to have proffers, and a lot of the developments in Reston prior to 1978 would not have, or prior to 1975 would not have proffers. We're also looking at creating additional flexibility, again, for community recreation spaces to allow for a new building up to 2,000 square feet, as well as building additions up to 2,000 square feet each. And this would be done through a PRC plan exception process. We're looking to retain the ability to do minor non-structural changes, such as additions of benches, playground equipment in the open space owned by a community facility. And if an HOA needed to go through a process of asking for a minor modification, we're looking at decreasing that fee. So we did talk a lot about PRC plan. The one change we are making to minor modification is allow for changes to rec facilities that do not materially change approved facilities. So, it can replace an active rec with something of a similar facility, and this would be a county-wide change. You may have a tennis court you want to replace with a basketball court, and if it's specifically proffered on that, we allow some flexibility under these changes to do that type of active rec to active rec. So as I mentioned before, we do have a dedicated website that has the white paper, copies of this presentation, the previous version of the draft text that we had. Once we look at updating the text, we will be providing that information on that dedicated web page, and then at that point we'll be doing some more outreach once we have revised text, and provide for additional opportunity to provide comments. And then we'll look to potentially schedule a public hearing with the board later this spring or summertime. I know it was a lot, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill. I'll just get started and just say, we certainly appreciate you all streamlining things, and we want reviews to be thorough, but to the extent we can make things easier for everybody, that's a worthy cause. So 2 thumbs up in my book. We may have some questions, comments, or thoughts from the group. Anyone? I don't know if I see any hand. There's Tammy. All right, Tammy.
Yes, a question, Bill. What is the procedure if, for example, and I'm sure that you're going to Reston Association and RTCA for their input as well, but what triggers the necessity for traffic studies and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of studies before changes. Is lighting something, or is there a panoply of things other than a gigantic size increase?
So when you're talking about what we're doing administratively, we're traditionally not asking for those type of studies. So, if it's a PRC plan exception, as we said, it's very small. It's currently hundreds of feet or thousands of feet. So that wouldn't traditionally look for those big studies. So, and I'll let Kathy go on. So if you're asking for minor modification or even, question about does this fall under the PRC plan exception, we need enough information to know what you're asking. So that's a letter. It's details shown as, hey, I want to build this addition, I want to make this change. So we're looking for you to explain in detail and preferably on some plans what that change is so we can understand the question. And then we'll either write back to you, or if it's minor modification, Kathy would write back to you. So when you get into the big traffic studies, you're right. You're talking significant increase in traffic that you would have to trigger a traffic study, even if if you file a PRC plan. I think they have to question, do you need to do traffic studies? So you have to answer that, but it's typically significant increase in traffic that you have to do studies in that scenario.
Right.
Okay.
Generally, if you're adding to the use in terms of intensity, that's going to be the sort of thing that would trigger a traffic study, but that's also going to be the same sort of thing that puts you outside of the administrative process. So.
Right. Okay. So basically, what RA has a problem with is whenever they redo a pool or an amenity, it has to be, and RA believes, in upgrading to ADA standards. And I just want to be sure that upgrading to ADA standards doesn't trigger some necessity for some god-awful expensive permit that
It doesn't. And in fact, the square footage, if something is directly an ADA requirement in terms of that square footage actually doesn't count against you. If you are meeting ADA standards, and in doing so, that's what's triggering the increase, as opposed to we want to make it bigger, that you get even more leeway for that.
So ADA changes for accessibility improvements are specifically exempted from PRC plan requirements.
Oh, that's super.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
All right. I don't see any other hands raised. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay.
So we have gone to RA previously, and I'm sure we'll be back if they ask us back. And like I said, drop the web page in the chat, so kind of keep track of that. We'll also work with Mark. And as we propose new language, we'll get it out to the supervisor, post it on the website, make sure everyone's informed, have an opportunity to look at any changes that kind of cement the new concepts we talked about today. And then, of course, as I said earlier, we hope to be going to the Planning Commission Board later this, hopefully upcoming summer, and our time frame.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yep.
We really appreciate you keeping us informed.
Yep, no problem.
So thank you for doing that.
Okay.
All right. Anything else related to that? If not, we'll let Bill and his crew enjoy the rest of their evenings.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Thank you for coming.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to do a quick kickoff, Mark, that I wouldn't mind being recorded, and then we'll shut off the recording and go into executive session to talk about our potential new candidates. So I just wanted to sort of refresh all of our memories about the purpose of the P&Z committee and our responsibilities. And I went through the rules and regulations, the bylaws for P&Z, and one of Rob's comments to us as he was leaving was it'd be good to sort of review and refresh the bylaws, given we've had a lot of discussions over the years, and would be good to sort of solidify that a little bit. So I'm going to just read what's in the bylaws for the purpose. The Planning and Zoning Committee shall review and advise the committee on planning and zoning matters, including proposed changes in the master plan, rezoning, development plans, and site plans in Reston and surrounding areas of direct interest to Reston. So that's our purpose. And then the responsibilities of committee members, which I think was good. Committee members shall commit to participate actively in all matters associated with the committee, except where such participation violates the provisions of these bylaws regarding conflicts of interest. In this regard, committee members shall be expected to attend all regularly scheduled and special meetings of the committee. Committee members shall conduct committee business with the utmost integrity and in a professional manner at all times. Committee members shall recuse themselves from any action, including discussion, voting, lobbying of the committee, or other participation where such actions may present a real or potential conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest. Lastly, committee members shall not disclose the proceedings or minutes of executive sessions of the committee without the prior approval by majority vote of the committee. So it's not earth shattering, but I thought it would be relevant to just refresh our memories about those items, especially for new members. And we can educate the new members once they get on the committee as well. So any comments on that before we turn off the recording? Questions? Okay. I would like to make a motion that we move into executive session to discuss our potential new candidates. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. So Mark, I don't know if I can tell when the recording stops.